Hi, my name is Reena Dayal, and I welcome you to this week's Get Your Fix. Today's conversation is going to be all about selling. Selling, especially when you're thinking about starting a business, a new venture, or perhaps if you're stuck and you're wondering what could you do differently so that you could sell to more clients and get more business. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of like a structured person. So I'm going to break up this conversation into 5 steps. You can follow it in that particular order, or perhaps you might have a slightly different routine. But all 5 steps, as you will see, will be very important. I'm actually going to use myself as an example so I can flesh out those steps a bit more for those who might want a little bit more detail. But first, let me establish a vital fact. 80% of businesses who are startups fail within the first 2 years of operations, not because they did not have a great product or service, but just because they weren't selling or they were not communicating in the right way, which is really the reason why today's conversation is so important and so vital. Okay, step one, start with the customer in mind. Think, what difference can you make? I mean, let's face it, if you are starting off a business or a new venture, or if you're already in the market, chances are that you have a product or service which is pretty unique and something which you know directly addresses the needs of a customer, either latent, known, or unknown. So we don't really have a problem where your product or service is concerned. It's now all about selling. To start thinking about the customer and what difference can you make. So for example, when I'm talking to my customer, I'm asking things like, would you like your career progression to move much faster? Would you like to become a trustee or board member with much higher impact? Are you feeling that you need to find ways to raise your team productivity levels? Do you feel you need to sharpen the game in influencing and negotiating with your stakeholders? Do you feel that you need to lead a life which is much more balanced and that you need to lead a life which is aligned to a higher purpose? Do you want to become an exponential, transformational leader in a disruptive world? You get the picture. I'm beginning to ask questions which is already there in the minds of the customer. Step two, the pain gain model. You want to spend a little bit more time engaging your customer and making them realize why they should be buying your product or service offering. So, the question that you're answering here is, what is it costing your customer if he or she were to not buy your product or service? And what would your customer gain if he or she bought your product or service offering? So, in my case, just listening to my earlier points, what is it that they are losing out on? Unfulfilled potential, sluggish careers, broken relationships at home, a stressed out life? What could they gain? Perhaps reaching their income goals much faster, getting to their personal and professional goals in less time and less stress, being able to impact communities way beyond their organization and becoming an exponential leader, being able to live a life which is so much more fulfilled and having greater peace of mind, being able to play their A game. So that's how the pain gain model works in step two. Okay, so step three, and again, as I mentioned to you, it might not be in this order, but this is the place where you actually offer your product and explain it out in a little bit more detail. And it could be a program, it could be a process, it could be a framework, it depends. But you make it really clear that it is a program that they can or a product that they can own and get real benefits. So make sure that there are either milestones or outcomes that are clearly laid out. So, for example, one of my offerings is what I call the SAT nav to greater impact, success, and happiness. The SAT is actually an acronym and it stands for Synergize, Accelerate, and Transform. But the interesting thing is that I've chosen this because it's aligned to my personal style. I love driving, for example. So for me, the sat nav is something that I often use, or sometimes I set aside when I'm going on a holiday because I just like to follow the road signs or perhaps a written map. So, driving is something that's close to my heart. So, when I've chosen a methodology, I've chosen a style of communication which is close to my heart because then my communication becomes so much more authentic. So, the question for you is what style are you adopting to be able to passionately and clearly spell out your product offering? As I said, in my case, it's the SatNav to greater impact, greater success, and greater happiness. That brings us to the end of part one on today's very important conversation on selling. Next week, we shall do part two. In the meantime, let me do a quick recap of the three steps that we covered today. And as I said, they don't need to be followed in that order. The first, start with the customer in mind. Think, what difference can you make? What difference will your product or offering make? And do this by asking questions that is already there in the mind of your customer. The second step, the pain gain model. Answer the question, what is the customer losing out if he or she was to not buy your product or service? Or for that matter, what is he or she gaining? The third step, put forward your very unique solution, product, or service offering. And make sure that you're making it clear what the goals and outcomes are. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you next week for part two of selling. All the best.